is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market equities surged past highs last seen in 2018 today. They, of course, were swept up in a global rally on U.S. stimulus hopes and positive COVID-19 vaccine updates. MSCI's benchmark emerging market equities index rose 0.3% on the day to hit its highest since January 2018. South Africa's benchmark stock index gained as much as 0.9% on the day, touching the highest since August 2018. Now, analysts say these stars seem to be aligning for the country's equity market as investors are now looking to migrate out of haven assets like bonds, cash and gold and increase their holdings in equities going forward. Now, also coming up on today's show. South Africa exits its longest recession in 3 decades. Tunisia forecasts a record harvest of dates by 2025. And the UK and the EU in a last-minute effort to salvage a Brexit trade talks. Well, let's start off today's show in South Africa. The country's Auditor General, its second report on COVID-19 spending in the country, revealing what it called significant faults in its procurement, its contract management and government spending processes. Now, presenting the report on Wednesday, the AG, Tsakani Maluleke, acknowledged that endemic government had to react quickly and decisively in uncertain times and in an already compromised control environment. She said that the country could have achieved more if the funds and related initiatives had been managed better. The lack of validation, integration and sharing of data across government platforms resulted in people, including government officials, receiving benefits and grants to which they were not entitled. She also added that since the first report, the Unemployment Insurance Fund had managed to recover over $200 million of incorrect or invalid payments that were made. Meanwhile, South Africa's economy grew by an annualized rate of 66.1% in the third quarter of 2020. The GDP data released by Stats South Africa took many by surprise, as most economists expected the economy to grow by 50%. Now, the sharp rebound is certainly good news, but it is important to note that it came off a very low base. Here's CGTN Sumitra Naidu reporting from Johannesburg.
The latest growth figures suggest South Africa is back in business. Gross domestic product increased 13.5% quarter on quarter, with every sector showing growth.
The extent to which the economy recovered in the third quarter took even the most optimistic people by surprise in the wake of the lifting of lockdown restrictions, that some of the measures that were taken by the Monetary and Fiscal Authority are also working to assist.
South Africa dipped into a recession before the COVID lockdown at the end of March this year. Almost all economic activity shut down, contributing to a 51% decline in growth in the second quarter. With all sectors open again, the economy looks set for a strong.
The fact that we went up 13%, we've recovered almost completely from the second quarter, where we had that massive fall in GDP as a result of the lockdown. There was a lot of pent-up demand in the second quarter, and that, when the restrictions started easing, you would have found that demand find its way into the GDP numbers in the third quarter.
Mining was up a massive 288%. The entire manufacturing industry so bounced back over 210%. Especially good news for jobs, as these two sectors are the largest employers in the country.
All sectors were in the positive, led by mining on the precious metal side. Very important for the country. I think the weaker currency at that time helped a lot. But at the same time, Manufacturing was also up. There was an improvement on the retail side, a milder improvement across the board.
Exports of goods and services increased by 201%, largely influenced by an increase in trade of vehicles and other transport equipment. Whilst this is a strong rebound, it does come off an extremely low base.
You've got to bear in mind that many of these sectors had seen a contracted peak growth in the second quarter of anywhere between 60 and 80% as well. So you had this huge reversal as in a response to a gradual opening up of the South African economy and a loosening of the lockdown restrictions that we had previously.
South Africa will need to work a lot harder, and government will have to address the structural challenges in order to keep up this momentum. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's head to Egypt now. The country has bought more derivative contracts to protect itself against a rise in oil costs. Now, the nation doubled its oil hedges during the 2020-2021 fiscal year ending in June, as some importers there seek to take advantage of this year's price rout. The Finance Ministry has yet to disclose the size of the program or other details. Egypt, of course, slashed its subsidies on most petroleum products last year as part of an economic reform program linked to a $12 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund. But the country continues to partially subsidize diesel and butane gas. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund has announced that it reached an agreement with Egypt on the first review of its economic reform program performance. The fund discussed with the Egyptian government the latest economic developments and policy priorities, which the IMF supports with a 12-month credit readiness agreement worth about $5.2 billion. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
The IMF review delegation to Egypt has described the government's economic policies as a success in withstanding the effects of the coronavirus and avoiding a major recession. The recommendations by the Bretton Woods delegation have opened the door for releasing $1.6 billion of a $5.2 billion one-year loan. But where will the government spend this amount?
The money will be spent on essential needs. For example, importing food and medicine. There are also big investments, whether in infrastructure, industrial, manufacturing or real estate. A lot of these investments are in hard currency and create jobs, which gives a boost to the economy and push economic growth up, unlike many countries which are witnessing a contraction.
The North African country is one of a few states worldwide to post positive growth rates, lower unemployment rates, and an 8% drop in inflation amidst the pandemic. However, Cairo had to reach out to international institutions, donor countries, and borrowing mechanisms such as bonds and treasuries to fund its stimulus package. Foreign debt stands at 33.5% of GDP.
The way the world reacted when Corona first broke out is different from now. In the first shock, there was no vaccine, no medicine, no information about the virus. It led to worldwide lockdowns, economic closures, and suspension of all flights. This had its financial toll, and in Egypt, investors pulled out their money out of the economy, so we had to resort to loans.
Some experts believe that the virus will be contained, especially with the vaccine on the ground and medical knowledge of how to treat the COVID-19 patients. Therefore, there might be no need for borrowing much in the future, as revenues are slowly picking up again. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, Zimbabwe has launched an electric car called the Nissan Leaf. That's as the Southern African nation prepares for the gradual shift from internal combustion vehicles to sustainable electric ones. Zimbabwe's energy regulator says the vehicles will support the country's renewable energy strategy. Here's Farai Mwakutuya with more.
The vehicle technology of the future has arrived in Zimbabwe, and authorities hope that cars like this will become the kings of the streets. Although the country is getting on board the electric vehicle drive late, it's confident of making up ground.
We're still a long way as a country, but we want to to leapfrog. There's already groundwork which was done, so we don't have much work to do in terms of breaking ground. We just have to take advantage of what has already been done.
A draft e-mobility policy has been developed to address the key questions around infrastructure and the country's long-standing power generation challenges.
What we also want to promote is the use of renewable energy in charging electric vehicles. It will be pointless that we take out internal combustion engines, take out fossil fuels, but at the same time we replace it with thermal power. You know, it will be defeating the whole purpose of e-mobility. So we're going to be encouraging that service stations, embrace renewable energy.
Proposals are also being tabled to extend incentives to players that invest in e-mobility infrastructure and those that import electric vehicles.
At the moment, the electric vehicles are a bit on the high side because there's no mass production. So we want to then try and bring down the cost so that through incentives so that we can have more vehicles coming into the country.
Zimbabwe's government has banned the importation of motor vehicles that are more than 10 years old in a bid to save foreign currency but also cut carbon emissions. It's seen as a further statement of intent to promote clean energy. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, let's now take a look at our corporate headlines today. Kenya's biggest telecoms operator, Safaricom, expects to end coronavirus-related price cuts at its mobile banking business, M-Pesa, at the end of this year. Now, the telecoms firm removed all charges on small peer-to-peer transfers in March to facilitate cashless payments during the COVID-19 pandemic. And British American Tobacco has raised its full-year revenue outlook, saying demand for its products has been resilient during the COVID-19 pandemic. BAT expects a global volume decline of cigarette and tobacco heating products of about 5%, and that's having previously expected a fall of about 7%. A further boost came from an earlier-than-expected lifting of South Africa's tobacco ban. Meanwhile, Nestle is jumping into the fake meat business in China in an attempt to revive weakening sales by grabbing market share in the country. The Swiss company has introduced a range of plant-based meat alternatives in China under its Harvest Gourmet brand. Now, this comes as the company saw a share of China's infant formula market drop to 12.8% this year from 13% in 2019. And finally, Japan's Toyota Motor Corporation has put its revamped Mirai hydrogen fuel cell car on sale. This is to promote the zero-emission technology amid rapidly growing demand for electric vehicles. The new Mirai launch comes after Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga announced a goal in October to cut Japan's carbon emissions to zero by 2050. The move is also in line with a European Union target and ahead of a pledge by Chinese President Xi Jinping to make his country carbon neutral by 2060. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still to come on the show. Tunisia forecasts a record harvest of dates by 2025. And Kenya and Ethiopia commission a border post to improve trade.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, access to electricity in emerging markets is improving globally, but according to the 2019 SDG Energy Progress Report, Sub-Saharan Africa still accounts for about 68% of the global access deficit. One of the main challenges is that as populations have grown, particularly in rural areas, governments have not prioritized spending the billions needed to expand traditional power grids to more households. Well, experts say the solution to this could lie in cheaper alternative off-grid solutions, such as mini-grids. Over the last couple of decades, investors, NGOs and innovators have been building a solar-powered mini-grids to serve small communities in rural areas as a way to help close that gap. Because they're more economically viable, many African governments, including Ethiopia, Kenya and Nigeria, are now making mini-grids a pillar of their national electrification plans, complementing grid extensions and, of course, solar home systems. Well, let's find out more about the future of these systems on the continent from one of the leading companies in the sector, Husk Power Systems. We're joined by CEO Manoj Sinha via Skype. Great to have you on the show with us, Mr. Sinha. Now, of course, your company, Husk Power Systems, it is the first operating in Africa to power about 100 communities and about 5,000 small business customers. You say you're now able to roll out at least 2 mini-grids per week. So give us a sense of what has fueled this growth. And certainly, why is it still taking too long for countries in Africa to achieve that meaningful scale that we need?
Great, and thank you for having me. So we are a 12 years old startup. We pioneered this mini-grid sector in my home country, India. So it has taken us a lot of time to finesse a lot of things that are needed to scale the business. And one definitely is the technology piece, but most importantly, the regulatory framework that allows us to operate in conjunction with the national grid. And thirdly, the ability to scale is all about people that has the process down, and it is highly replicable. And as you were saying, it is more cost effective. So for example, it takes $150,000 to extend the grid in East African countries for a distance of 10 kilometers. We can install the whole mini-grid system for a village of say 300 to 400 households in less than that money. So any national electrification program has to include mini-grid as a part of overall solution. And lastly, why we are able to scale quickly and profitably is the demand management. We don't just provide electrons to do, light bulbs and maybe a television. We are really promoting the productive uses of power, which means our customers, small businesses and others can use our three-phase electricity to run equipment. And we also intervene in the agricultural processing side of the equation. So we provide irrigation as a service, and at the same time, we provide electricity and equipment to process, say, maize and other produce in the village. So this whole ecosystem approach where we are implementing technology, managing demand effectively, and working with regulators so it becomes part of national electrification program has led to this high growth rate for us.
Now, of course, the question is on the table, why hasn't the sector grown quicker? Many stakeholders do say it's because of two things, favorable regulation and of course, funding. You have been successful. You've raised about $25 million in equity financing. And of course, you're looking to expand across Africa. So do you agree that these are the two biggest setbacks in the sector? And what has been your experience?
Right, so I would partially agree with that, not in full agreement with those two factors. So equity funding is available for expansion of off-grid solutions, especially the mini-grids, in many countries in Africa. Right, some of the countries that you were mentioning that included Nigeria and some countries in East Africa. I don't think there is a dearth of equity capital to expand. What is lagging behind is regulation that should be more forward-looking. So, East Africa leapfrog, they did not go through, the countries did not go through landline to get telephone. They just leapfrogged to cell phones. That's the kind of mindset or strategic mindset that government needs to have when they're building the national electrification program. An example in the case is Nigeria. India implemented, in Asia, India implemented mini-grid regulation in 2016. Nigeria took that best practices and implemented by the beginning of 2017. So that's what is lagging behind.
Right.
When the policy is clear, the money flows in.
Right. Well, recouping your investment, especially as a private sector, that also is a major challenge, especially as you mentioned, given regulation and of course tariff policies in several nations. Give us a sense of how you've been able to manage those costs and of course still make revenue.
Right. So the cost management is a lot of discipline, right? So if you look at 100 megawatt or 1 gigawatt scale solar, the cost is really very well managed. So we have learned from those best practices. In addition to that, we use biomass gasification system as a second source of energy, which is much cheaper than diesel and any other source of energy available, including battery. So it is our unique combination of power generation assets that makes us the lowest cost electricity provider in the sector. But most importantly, that I was talking about in the beginning, how do you really spur the demand? And the demand cannot be just spurred by offering people to electricity to light bulbs, right? It really has to impact the economic growth of the small businesses in that community. And that's where we do much more than anybody else does in the sector. So we not only provide electricity or electrons, we really provide what kind of machines they can use, what kind of value chain intervention can be made. And we even finance those appliances so that they can use that appliance to generate more cash. And that's how it becomes a virtuous cycle and enables us to be commercially viable in a much shorter period of time.
Well, on that note, what is your outlook for this sector? Of course, experts do say that technology and economic trends are in your favor and the industry is poised to grow rapidly in the next decade. Give us a sense of how COVID-19 impacted the business and certainly also what does Africa need to do to unlock the sector's growth potential?
Right, so I guess the biggest elephant in the room for 2020, perhaps hopefully the only pandemic in our lifetime, definitely was very painful and it impacted our growth very severely, including our customers who could not even keep their shops open, right, because of multiple lockdowns. Having said that, we really helped our customers by offering them a lot of discounts so that they can get back on the feet, and the impact of COVID-19 on our end customers is not as pronounced, because literally we joke around, we are essentially in a marriage with our customers. So this relationship is 20, 30 years long, and that's why our intervention was to give them discount during this period. Now, about the growth potential, Africa as a continent, there are about 700 million people without access to any power, and probably another 300 to 400 million people without access to reliable power, right? And this population needs to have high quality power and reliable power so that they can go about their business and not have to worry about electricity. So the growth potential is primarily because of that. And I think the government regulation clarity that includes mini grid, which is much more capital efficient way of electrification in their national electrification program, then it is going to be no different than how telecom industry for cell phones grew about a decade ago.
Quite right. Well, we're certainly watching that industry closely. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. That, of course, is Mr. Manoj Sinha. He is the CEO of Husk Power Systems. Well, let's now turn our attention to Tunisia. The country's agriculture ministry says the production of dates in the country will exceed local demand in the coming few years. Now, this, of course, follows the cultivation of some 30,000 hectares of date palms in the south of the nation. The government forecasts a record harvest of not less than 400,000 tons by 2025. And it hopes to promote exports of dates so as to gain new markets. Here's CGTN's Anand Shaushi with the details.
The interprofessional group of dates is financing dozens of open-air markets in many cities across the country. This initiative is part of the Agriculture Ministry's marketing campaign. It aims to boost direct selling from producers to consumers.
This year's harvest is exceptional, but prices remain high. We're organizing this event to promote the direct distribution of dates at an affordable price for all social classes and to ensure a better organization of direct distribution channels in production areas and to focus on short circuits to promote the local market.
The production in the current harvest season has now reached 345,000 tons, including 283,000 tons of high-quality dates known as Deglet and Noor. However, many farmers have decried the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on their annual revenue, which decreased by over 50%.
The marketing crisis is due to many factors, including the coronavirus pandemic. The cost of production is 20% higher than the market price. 80% of producers are small-scale farmers who cannot market their harvest without state support. We cannot sell over 220,000 tons of dates because 163 weekly open-air markets are closed due to the health crisis.
Nabil Chokmeni is the co-founder of the company Eden Palm in the governorate of Tozeur, southern Tunisia. The expert in dates offers an authentic experience to customers who can visit hectares of palm trees and discover the oasis culture.
The tourists who used to buy tons of dates have deserted the country this season. It's the state's duty to help producers market the dates harvested to foreign markets. Many indicators show a growing interest in Tunisian dates abroad. It's a healthy and organic fruit, but it's absurd that we cannot export our production this year.
According to the interprofessional group of dates, the quality of the dates has been affected by the rise in temperatures from September to October. In addition, the percentage of high and medium quality dates represents 30% and 50% of production, respectively. The objective of the Ministry of Agriculture for this season is to export 130,000 tons of dates to Europe and Asia. However, experts say the lack of visibility on the international markets due to the coronavirus crisis and the cancellation of food fairs are the main difficulties faced by the exporters. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, Kenya and Ethiopia have commissioned the Moyale one-stop border post in a move that seeks to boost trade between the two nations. The border post will reduce the time taken and costs incurred to clear goods across the two neighboring nations. Here's CGTN's Enoch Sikolia reporting.
Moyale town, a harsh, hot and unforgiving landscape straddling the border with Ethiopia. Not so much a protective wall, but a regional belt dividing the bodies of two nations, tribes and families. But through infrastructure developments, Kenya and Ethiopia are working towards the integration of people and services.
This new infrastructure will bring the two families, which is living in two countries, to come together and to tap untapped potential and lots of opportunity on business.
Abiy Ahmed and his Kenyan host Uhuru Kenyatta commissioned a one-stop border point to ensure efficiency. Part of the program is the new Lamu port. The facility is expected to link the Kenyan coast with Ethiopia and South Sudan. But the border, straddling a length of 861 kilometers, is a porous one. The insecurity it dishes out ends up threatening development programs. The two leaders now want issues of insecurity addressed.
We cannot establish an economic victory if we are consistently also going to be having security challenges.
Both Kenya and Ethiopia are neighbors to Somalia, the home of the Al-Shabaab terror group that has continued to terrorize the region.
So we must work together as two neighbors to deal with those elements who live in and amongst us and who threaten the peace and the stability of both Kenya and Ethiopia.
If we could eliminate Al-Shabaab and oil from this region, you can see how these people can be transformed.
The Ethiopian Prime Minister is on a 2-day visit of Kenya. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN, Nairobi.
Now, there are over 200 COVID-19 vaccines being developed globally, and several nations are expected to begin vaccinations in December. Of course, the UK has already begun, but according to a World Health Organization report, the African continent has much to do before it becomes fully ready for a vaccine rollout. Here's CGTN's Robert Nagila with the details.
As developed countries prepare for a COVID-19 vaccine rollout, a study by the World Health Organization in November found that Africa is far from ready for the immunization drive. The study, based on self-reports by African countries, shows that the continent has an average 33% readiness for a vaccine rollout, well below the 80% benchmark. The analysis found that 49% of African countries had identified priority populations for vaccination, while 24% of countries had adequate plans for resources and funding. WHO estimates the cost of rolling out a COVID-19 vaccine on the African continent will be around $5.7 billion. Now, in September, the World Health Organization announced African countries will begin receiving COVID-19 vaccines in small portions from 2021. Each country will get doses that vaccinate 1 in every 5 people, beginning with the most vulnerable. WHO, together with Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, and other partners, are working to ensure access to vaccines in Africa through the COVAX facility. Now, COVAX was established to ensure equitable access and allocation of COVID-19 vaccines between developed countries and the developing world. And many African countries are now looking to China for a vaccine. Compared with Pfizer and Moderna, Chinese vaccines have a huge advantage. Storage for most of them does not require freezing temperatures, making transport and distribution of the vaccine easier.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break. Still to come. The UK and EU in last-minute efforts to salvage Brexit trade talks. And China's consumer price index records the first decline since October 2009.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
And here's a quick look at other news making headlines today. Vote counting is underway in Liberia following a constitutional referendum on Tuesday. Now, Liberians are choosing whether or not to shorten presidential terms. President George Weah has told supporters keeping the same leader for years is not the way to go. But of course, his critics fear he could use the change to seek a third term. The country's constitution currently sets a maximum of 2 terms. Initial results are expected this week, and if passed, presidents and lower house lawmakers will serve 5 years instead of 6, and senators 7 years instead of 9. An Ethiopian National Disaster Risk Management Commission says the humanitarian situation in the north of the nation is significantly improving. Authorities say the much-needed assistance is being delivered consistently to those affected in the Tigray region. The UN still estimates thousands remain in a dire humanitarian situation in the country. And finally, top UN peacekeeping and peace-building officials have met the Security Council and briefed them on the situation in Sudan. The coronavirus pandemic, severe flooding, and an influx of over 48,000 refugees from Ethiopia have put a strain on the Sudanese authorities and increased humanitarian needs. Now, the UN is currently winding down its peacekeeping mission in Darfur. It is also preparing to launch an integrated transition assistance mission in Sudan on the 1st of January 2021. And that is a recap of today's top headlines. Now to news outside of the continent. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson left for Brussels on Wednesday in a last-minute effort to salvage the stalled Brexit trade talks. He won't be showing up empty-handed. On Tuesday, the two parties reached an agreement on the implementation of the Brexit withdrawal agreement. Now, this ended a dispute over the Northern Ireland border. Here's CGTN's Tony Waterman with more from Brussels.
When UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson sits down for dinner with Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen on Wednesday evening, there's at least one contentious item that will be off the menu. The UK government on Tuesday agreed to drop controversial clauses in its internal market bill, which would have allowed ministers to rip up parts of the Brexit divorce deal agreed to just a year ago. This has been hanging like a dark cloud over Brexit talks since the Johnson administration tabled this bill in the UK Parliament back in September, saying that the clauses were needed to ensure goods continued to flow between Northern Ireland and Great Britain in case Brexit talks failed. But here in Brussels, these clauses have caused immense frustration, disappointment, and mistrust. So this news has been received positively, but also cautiously.
We will continue to follow this closely and make sure the contentious provisions are effectively withdrawn. I hope that this would create positive momentum also for the discussions on the free trade agreement.
Now, Northern Ireland will remain in the EU's customs union next year, while the rest of the UK will not. But now it seems that the dreaded hard border has been softened. The UK Cabinet Office has confirmed there will be border control posts for checks on animals, plants, and derived products, and to certify export declarations. It will also apply to the supply of medicines and food products to supermarkets. But crucially, it implements a mechanism for tackling disputes, which may well be a blueprint for a trade deal. Talks on a post-Brexit trade deal remain on a knife's edge, and they've really been at a virtual standstill for weeks now. Both sides still at odds over fishing rights, governance, and the level playing field. So all attention now is on this Johnson-von der Leyen powwow, which comes just a day before EU leaders meet for a summit. Now, on Tuesday, Brussels tried to walk back reports that EU chief negotiator Michel Barnier said that talks would not go beyond Wednesday. The Commission said that the sit-down meeting is going to try to lift substantial impasses so that the negotiators can continue their work, meaning that these talks, at least in Brussels' perspective, still have some legs. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
Now, in the U.S., President-elect Joe Biden has laid out his plans to fight the coronavirus pandemic during his first 100 days in office. He says his administration will vaccinate 100 million Americans, and he's vowed to reopen schools and strengthen mask mandates. Now, this comes after the Trump administration held a summit on vaccine development on Tuesday. Here's Nathan King reporting.
With the approval of the first vaccine to protect against COVID-19 in the United States potentially just days away, this White House summit is timely. Aimed at educating and reassuring the public about the coronavirus vaccine and its distribution, the Operation Warp Speed event was also staged to thank those who made it possible in record time. US President Trump began by giving himself credit.
Today we're on the verge of another American medical miracle, and that's what people are saying. People that aren't necessarily big fans of Donald Trump are saying, whether you like him or not, this is one of the greatest miracles in the history of modern day medicine or any other medicine, any other age of medicine.
With approval of the dual-dose Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech's vaccine expected in the next few days, the US Food and Drug Administration announced that it backs findings that it is around 95% effective. Noticeably absent, however, from this meeting, representatives of Pfizer and other vaccine manufacturers. Also, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert, who has often contradicted the president over COVID-19. The White House says it's ready to ship 6 million doses of the vaccine, which will be sent to states, then distributed to frontline healthcare workers and the elderly in nursing homes first. Officials say every American will receive at least one dose of the vaccine by the middle of 2021, although reports suggest the White House has not yet guaranteed the delivery of more than 100 million doses. The US president signed an executive order that he said would ensure Americans get the vaccine first ahead of other nations. Other officials remain silent on the issue.
We still have a lot to do. We still have vaccines that are being tested in phase 3. We are continuing to drive as fastly and as safely as we can the development and the manufacturing of this vaccine.
Other vaccines are also on the way, and they can't come soon enough. The United States, which is seeing record cases, hospitalizations and deaths. Also absent from this event were members of the transition team of President-elect Joe Biden. It will largely fall to his administration to make sure that every American gets a vaccine. Meanwhile, President Trump used this event to incorrectly say once again that he won the election, choosing to focus on votes, not the vaccine. Nathan King, CGTN at the White House.
And adding to China now, the latest data from the country's Statistics Bureau shows the consumer price index fell 0.5% in November from a year earlier. That was the first decline since October 2009. Now, consumer prices dipped 0.6% on a monthly basis, with lower food prices the main drag on CPI. Pork prices fell 12.5% year on year, while prices for eggs were down nearly 20%.
The fall in year-on-year CPI was driven mostly by volatile food prices. Declining prices for pork and vegetables contributed to the drop in CPI.
Vegetables that normally see a big volume of consumption in winter, like cabbage, potatoes, radishes, and carrots, witnessed a 10% drop in price in November. Supplies for spinach and kale have also increased, so their prices have also dropped.
There were 30% more cabbages in the Beijing market in November. That's why there was such an obvious drop in prices. The average price for vegetables in Beijing was down to about 3 yuan a kilogram. That's a bargain compared to October. Pork prices were about 35 yuan per kilogram. That was down 2.7% on month. That came mostly because of a 23% monthly increase in pork supplies.
Pork prices have dropped for 4 consecutive months since October. The price has been down about 15% year-on-year. Ribs and pork belly saw prices dropping even more, about 20% on year.
But retailers say that consumers might frown again as pork prices rise in December. Increasing demand, snowy weather in some regions, and strict inspections of cold chain food are the main reasons for the jump. But as the supply of live pigs continues to increase, the rise in prices is seen as temporary.
Now the production of live pigs has recovered to 88% of normal capacity. As the production ability improves, prices for live pigs and pork will go downward.
Pork prices in China fell for the first time in more than a year in October after a month of surging prices for the country's most popular meat. Prices doubled last fall and continue their rapid rise into this spring as African swine fever decimated pig farms across China. Song Yaotian, CGTN.
And shifting focus now, sales of electric cars topped 2.1 million globally in 2019. That's a 6% year-on-year increase. The Global Electric Vehicles Outlook report showed that electric cars accounted for over 2.5% of global car sales. The market is expanding significantly thanks to technological progress in the electrification of a variety of vehicles. Now, policy announcements have also been stimulating the electric vehicle rollout in major vehicle markets. The report also noted that sales of electric passenger and commercial light-duty vehicles will remain broadly at 2019 levels. That's even as the passenger car market contracts 15% based on sales data from January to April. The report estimated that electric car sales will account for about 3% of global car sales for the whole year. Meanwhile, the ongoing pandemic has kept museums shut and visitors away for months. The Louvre in Paris is just one of those institutions affected, but it's now hit upon an auction with a difference to raise funds. What's on offer is a once-in-a-lifetime experience with the Mona Lisa. Take a look.
Having a chance to get really familiar with the Mona Lisa is what's being put up for sale in the online auction called Bid for the Louvre. The highest bidder gets the opportunity to be present for the annual examination of Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece. The Mona Lisa, one of the world's most famous paintings, is taken down from the wall and removed from its glass case for a quick check every year. The reason for the auction is to help up for some of the Louvre's financial losses due to the pandemic. It's reported to have lost between 80 and 90 million euros in revenue from admission fees and profits from restaurants and bookstores.
The Louvre's name is known throughout the world, and thanks to that reputation, we also have benefactors who come from around the world, companies who support us from around the world. But contrary to what you might think, that doesn't mean that the Louvre is an extremely rich museum. It's rich in terms of its collections, its history, its masterpieces. But that role as the world's #1 museum means we have a big responsibility, and that comes at a cost.
Auctioneer Christie's hopes the online auction will help to raise more than 1 million euros. It includes an estimated 10,000 to 30,000 euros for the Mona Lisa experience.
It's such an unusual opportunity to attend the annual examination of the Mona Lisa outside a display case. You know, it's really an unprecedented possibility. And in the past, only a few statesmen have had the possibility to attend this very moment when they were visiting the country. So as a diplomatic gift. But for the wider public, it's rather impossible. It's taking place every year in December at a secret date. And it's really an opportunity to not only see the Mona Lisa outside a display case, but to really see the object itself.
The sale started on December the 1st and runs through the 15th. Contemporary artworks, donations by luxury brands and experiences are also being auctioned off in aid of the museum's educational projects. The Louvre received nearly 10 million visitors in 2019, but has been closed for more than 5 months this year during 2 COVID-19 lockdowns. While it was open in the summer, numbers through the gate were down by as much as 75% during what are normally peak months. Lin, CGTN.
Well, let's move on now to commodity markets today. Oil prices were up as investors remain optimistic about a recovery in fuel demand. Now, the market ignored recent figures released indicating that U.S. oil inventories jumped up last week. According to the American Petroleum Institute, crude stocks jumped by 1.14 million barrels. But of course, traders are saying the near-term oil demand outlook is still very much under the COVID-19 shadow. Meanwhile, gold prices easing today as encouraging vaccine developments pushed investors towards riskier equities. However, some hope for more U.S. stimulus kept those prices near the two-week highs, which they hit in the previous session. Copper prices also expected to continue an advance, especially as factory activity in China, the biggest metals user, continues to accelerate. Well, we're going to take a short break now, still coming up on the show. Farmers in Tanzania turn to mobile phone applications to boost their productivity.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, farmers in Tanzania are increasingly using mobile phone applications as a means of boosting product and profits. AgriPoa, a Tanzanian Android app that enables farmers to get connected to each other and to experts, is now part of a growing trend in the country of using mobile technology in farming. As CGTN's Isaac Lucando reports, the farm management software has doubled efforts to practice smart agriculture.
35-year-old Placidius Rechungura has always loved computers and farming. His days as an IT officer in the banking sector gave him an idea to combine the two.
The bankers could want some enough data from the farmers, such as the history of farm, the expenses being incurred during the development of the farm, etc., etc. Now, I noted that the farmers could miss getting loan because they didn't have enough data to support them, enough farm data to support them. So this is where AgriPoa came.
Using artificial intelligence, the mobile phone app helps farmers plan, monitor, and analyze their activities. The goal being to increase knowledge, profits, and creditworthiness.
For a poultry farmer, map where the farmer is, the farm location. We can also assist the farmer to get connected with farm expert so that he can chat and explain his challenges incurred during farming.
According to World Bank statistics, 66% of small-scale farmers in Tanzania have mobile phones. This means Tanzania has among the highest mobile phone penetration in the agricultural sector in Africa. According to the 2020 Global Innovation Index report, Tanzania ranked 3rd in sub-Saharan Africa, doing particularly well in the area of creativity. Placidius Rechungura's app is one of many examples of Tanzania's growing innovation ecosystem that is helping to grow incomes and transform lives in the process. Eli Tumaini Maro, a poultry farmer since 2006, is one of 100 AgriPoa users. She believes the use of apps may be useful to Tanzania's over.
The major difference between me as a user of this app and another person who doesn't is that it makes doing business easy. Because without this app, in terms of clients, one will have to make phone calls, search different markets, clients coming and not buying. But I have the assurance of clients, even if the chickens get sick, they get health services.
Placidius plans to roll out the app to every district in Tanzania and even outside the country. Competition from similar apps and securing financing are some of the hurdles he faces in achieving his ambitious goal of changing the lives of 1 million farmers through the app. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, before we leave you today, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand hitting a 10-month high today, extending gains after economic data released on Tuesday showed a stronger than expected economic rebound in the third quarter. Now, analysts say the rand has done exceptionally well after the initial sell-off. Meanwhile, Nigeria's naira, on the other hand, continues to weaken on the back of news that the country's external reserve lost over $400 million in about a month. According to analysts, despite the CBN interventions, a huge demand backlog by manufacturers and foreign investors is still creating a volatile situation in the foreign exchange market. Well, that's it for this edition of Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.